Okay. All right, we're live. Here we go. Welcome and thank you for coming, everyone. I'm Hannah Black, the Dutchess County Legislator for District 4 in the town of Hyde Park. And it's a great honor that the panelists here tonight are here to share their knowledge and expertise in the areas they will discuss. We are approaching this as an opportunity to learn, educate, explore, and bring our resources together to help better our community. So what we're going to do is we're going to let the panelists speak on their topics for up to 20 minutes. So please hold your questions or comments for the end after each panelist has had their opportunity to share their knowledge. Those of you with questions or comments may come up to the podium here using the microphone. Please keep in mind that we may not have all the answers to specific questions. However, we can take your questions and research them afterwards. This is a part of the learning process. And then I thought it would be best for each panelist to briefly introduce themselves with their name, title, and why they're here.
So I'm Assemblyman Frank Skartados, representing parts of Dutchess, Ulster, and Orange. In Dutchess County, I represent the city of Poughkeepsie and the city of Beacon. In Orange County, I represent the city of Newburgh and the town of Newburgh. And in Ulster County, where I live, I represent Lloyd and Marlborough. As a legislator, obviously this is a very important topic that we are dealing with it in Albany. We have a long way to achieve our objectives in carteling and preventing children from ending up in our justice systems and eventually in our jail. So this is a great opportunity, and thank you for the invitation to participate.
Well, I don't have anything very impressive to compare with that. I don't actually do very much at all. I sort of sleep late, I dine at 8, cogitate. I'm a retired man. And what I did in my more productive years was at Columbia University Psychiatry Department and Hudson River Psychiatric Center. And I did research on mental illness, and I guess I'll figure out later on why it is I'm sitting up here.
Hello, my name is Minkowitz. I am the Bullying Prevention Coordinator at the Mediation Center of Dutchess County, also known as Dutchess County's best kept secret, but we're hoping to change that. I coordinate the Bullying Prevention Initiative, and there are multiple facets to what we do. We provide a couple of one-time events during the year for students, and I also conduct what is known as the Alveus Bullying Prevention Program trainings, and I do consulting for schools that are interested in cultural change models to implement more less punitive measures in school to approach behavioral problems, such as bullying. And I also do some case consultation in case families are having issues with schools and they are interested in learning about other ways of approaching the issue. And I'm also a mediator, obviously, at the Mediation Center. So I'm here to talk about prevention methods that we can offer at the Mediation Center. And I do have, at the end of the session, some flyers and information that you're welcome to take with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Albert Cook, and I am a history teacher at New Paltz High School. I teach world history for 9th graders, advanced placement American history for 11th graders, and Black history 1 and 2 for all students there. The reason why I'm here is I have a real passion for the issue, especially how race intersects with mass incarceration in the United States and how serious of a problem I think that is. And so I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means. I'm interested very much so in the issue. And so I'm going to speak to that for a few minutes and hopefully raise some meaningful points.
Good evening. My name is Paul Donnelly. I live here in Hyde Park, but I have taught U.S. history and government and participation in government in the Poughkeepsie City School District, and I've been there for 11 years. I'm here because I witness every day the failed public policy and how it affects teachers, students, and most of all the community. And I'm motivated by several conversations that I've had with students that ask me, why does the governor want to close schools in Poughkeepsie, but we're building a much larger jail? So I feel like I have an obligation to find out and look for ways to stop the school-to-prison pipeline.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to start with Assemblyman Skartados.
Okay, well, thank you. Like everyone else here on the panel, I am no expert either, but you know, I think we all have an opinion when it comes to our children in our schools. But at the same time, I'd like to warn you that, especially those on the panel, that we may be crossing over, you know, on different topics and information. I'm not sure that I can stick to the defined guidelines that you gave me. But first, I'd like to start off by saying that I've lived in Dutchess County, and particularly in the city of Poughkeepsie. And I want to say that in 1999, I had the opportunity to actually be a part of a jury duty in Dutchess County. And it was a very serious case where a high school student was involved in a murder. And this high school student was dismissed from class sometime in the afternoon, and in the process he picked up a friend. He ended up on Main Street on the 400 block, and subsequently he shot someone, and now I'm on the jury duty. It was a very difficult case, but you know, the kid was convicted. Probably he was convicted 25 to life, so he's probably still in jail. So this is the kind of a thing that actually happens, and this is the reason why we are here to perhaps discuss and see if we can find some solutions to this very important problem. Recently, also, by the way, I had the opportunity to visit the Fishkill Correctional Facility. And I can assure you that the correctional facilities are no academies. In fact, they're academies for criminals. If they are not criminals when they go in, they come out professional criminals. So it is not a place where children belong. And once again, you know, what do we do to stop this from happening in the first place? Now, I think we all know the cost of incarceration and the cost of guns and violence, for example. Let me just give you a few statistics. The cost of guns and violence in the United States is $460 billion, which ends up to be about $3,257 for each of us, each citizen. This is the cost. The cost to New York State from 2010-2013 for Medicaid treatment alone was $13 million to treat 1,840 gunshot victims. And the cost for the loss of life, the loss of productivity, the physical and psychological impact to families and communities is just immeasurable. So prison cost versus cost of education. In 1971, the cost of education was about $4,000 to educate a student. Of course, today that is probably 5 times the amount. I happen to live in Marlboro, and there it costs us about $25,000, $26,000 per student. But even that does not compare to the cost of actually sending someone to prison, which requires about 1 person for every 3 inmates. 1 person for every 3 inmates. Could you imagine if we had 1 teacher for every 3 students in the classroom? That would be amazing. So, our justice systems, from policing to the courts, to the clerks, to the do everything else that goes in processing and incarcerating a child is basically tremendous. In fact, our justice system is the sixth largest employer in the nation. Sixth largest employer. I believe if we were to do away with crime and eliminate, the police and everything, our economy would probably collapse. But at the same time, what a waste of resources. What a waste of talent. So in New York State's, this year, in our New York State budget, we took a multi-pronged approach to addressing the issue of education in particular and all the other things that go with it from a holistic perspective. So a multi-pronged effort to prevent costly incarceration and an end to the school to prison pipeline kind of a thing. First, funding. We increased funding this year, which was the largest funding ever, by $1.5 billion as a foundation aid. We also did away with the gap elimination adjustment, which was nearly $500 million. This was a significant amount of money that we put into the school system, and I'm not saying it wasn't warranted. It was. In fact, the state has been short changing our educational systems and our schools. So now, money may not solve all school problems, but more of it is needed to maintain and expand critical programs that are designed to help low-income and struggling schools. So the other thing that we've done was to create what is known as community schools. So we invested $175 million in this year's budget to transform failing and struggling schools into community schools, which have wraparound services to include parent-teacher, home visits, meal programs, tutoring, and counseling. I think investing in early education is extremely important, and the other thing we've done was we invested $50 million to institute a program which was initially advocated by the Obama administration, known as My Brother's Keeper. And My Brother's Keeper basically focuses on black and brown children in particular, and make sure that by third grade they're all reading at the same level. My own personal input in this year's budget and for my community, there were additional things. One of the things that I've done was to secure $100,000, which is a multi-year kind of a funding to address the heroin epidemic here in the Hudson Valley. In addition, we've secured $1 million for the city of Newburgh. In total, there was $25 million that we appropriated in the budget for statewide, in particular cities that had 20% of its population was below poverty line. So the city of Newburgh qualified, and we secured $1 million for them. And for the city of Poughkeepsie, we've secured $300,000, which is a multi-year program for what is known as SNUG. And SNUG stands gun spelled backwards. So those were my few things in the state budget. So here it comes to legislation. First of all, we handed out to you a piece of paper that has different pieces of legislation on. And I've done a little research. I am a co-sponsor in most of them, but I intend to probably co-sponsor everything else that is there. The point is, at the bottom, if you look at the bottom, by the way, and if you want to investigate further about these different bills that exist, there's a lot of information. You can look at the bottom of the page on the left-hand side, and you can go to, you can Google it or visit that site, and you can see any bill in the State Assembly and the Senate. Senate bills have an S in front of them. Assembly bills have an A in front of them. So if you want to know more about them, and there's just so much of it, you can do that. My thing was to basically focus on two bills. One in particular is Bill number 8396, which was introduced by Assemblywoman Nolan in the Assembly, and Assemblywoman Nolan is the chair of the Education Committee. So this is a safe and supportive school bill, which was advocated by students, parents, community members, civil rights leaders, working to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline. This bill is in response to ineffective disciplinary school policies that are pushing students out of school and into our justice system. Now, research shows that racial disparity practices in school discipline in New York City, for example, in small city communities, is driven by discriminatory policies of suspension, expulsion, criminal summons, and arrests. Let me give you some statistics. Black students represent approximately 18% of all students, but receive almost half of all out-of-school suspensions. Black students are 4 times more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts. Black girls are 11 times more likely to be referred for exclusionary discipline. Students with disabilities are expelled at twice the rate of their peers. And Black and Latino students represent almost 100% of all students that are arrested. So under this bill, which by the way was supported by the SED, the State Education Department, all codes of conduct must contain common sense use of discipline that takes into consideration such circumstances, students' age, limited English proficiency, disability or educational status, and uses exclusionary discipline as a last resort. All codes of conduct will develop school policies that encourage healthy and inclusive communities through such practices as restorative justice. This is a very important concept which focuses on victims and offenders at the same time. Also, peer mediation and emphasis on conflict resolution by empowering students to resolve conflicts in small groups. Here, the focus is on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and communities and peer-to-peer adjudication. In this bill, all codes of conduct will contain policies that limit interaction with law enforcement and students, eliminate the use of suspension for students in K through third grade, except in cases that threaten the safety of students or staff. In this bill, it will eliminate the use of suspension for minor infractions such as tardiness, dress code violations, failing to show identification, and insubordination. This bill will also ensure due process rights for students removed from school for exclusionary discipline, and it require comprehensive training in positive strategies for improving school climate. So the other thing that it does is require all public schools, including charter schools, to follow the same standards. I really do not think that we can ignore the long-term impact of treating school children like criminals. One suspension in high school doubles the likelihood that that student is going to drop out of school and into the criminal justice system. Obviously this is a problem. So the other bill that I also like to point out is Bill number 9673. And this one is the title of which is Urban Youth Gun Violence Reduction. This is a pilot program designed to bring on-site social workers on full-time basis during and after-school programs for students with mental health incidents that lead to gun violence. So this bill will create a safe school environment to address the root causes of gun violence in our communities as it relates to mental health, and will provide preventive care that includes identification of the mental health illness. This bill will include first aid training for teachers and staff and develops age-appropriate mental health curriculum. Also, Congressman Maloney has introduced a bill in the United States Congress, and it's bill number HR 4654. And this bill creates a Department of Justice grant program to assist law enforcement agencies and local prosecutors in providing pre-booking diversion program, working with local drug treatment programs to address low-level drug crimes. I would highly recommend and encourage every one of you to really take a look at these bills, and call your assemblyman or your senator or your congressman and ask that these procedures are adopted, these bills move forward, they go to the committees, they go to the appropriate committees, and they come on the floor for a vote, and hopefully the governor will actually sign them into law. It's that important. So there's a lot of information that we can talk about, but I don't want to, capitalize all the time. So I'll wait for your questions later. So thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Now on to Dr. Roger Christenfeld.
Thank you. Oh, lots of people out there. Good evening. Our Assemblyman gives us lots of reason for hope, but still, the county plans to build a humongous jail, and a great number of people in it are going to be mentally ill or substance addicted. And how does this happen? The county executive said that he didn't put it up for a referendum because it would lose. It does not have popular appeal. There's no reason for it to. It is, in fact, the largest pork barrel in county history. Any county executive would salivate in a Pavlovian way with $192 million to give out to a variety of people, some of whom may be contributors to the Republican Party, but I wouldn't wish to suggest that. I am here, I think I have figured out, because I have many years of experience in research with the mentally ill, and also because I am old enough to put this mentally ill in jail problem in historical context. I was present at the creation. The first qualification, I think I would immediately want to disavow that after all these years, mental illness remains just as mysterious to me as it was when I started out. And in fact, some people I think, and I believe justifiably, that is in fact definitional of mental illness. It is the sort of illness that we cannot explain. Psychiatry is, to a considerable extent, a wastebasket specialty. if we find an actual cause for any mental illness, it moves out of psychiatry. If we find out that the strange behavior is due to a lack of niacin in the diet and resultant pellagra, moves over to nutritional sciences. If we find out that the paresis is causing very strange and inexplicable behavior, we discover that it is in fact tertiary syphilis, and it moves over to infectious disease. Now, there is a great amount of effort in the field of neurology and microbiology and genetics, and we are left with inexplicable diseases. One of the reasons that they are inexplicable is that they are defined simply by symptoms, by behavior, as judged by a professional or as judged by oneself or one's family and friends. There is no objective basis for defining mental illness, although we continue to try to seek one. And diseases without some objective basis make people nervous. Get something like polymyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, you can't find anything, ship it over to psychiatry. There must be something mentally wrong with that patient. So when we hear that 70 or 80% of the population of the Dutchess County Jail are mentally ill or substance addicted, we're not quite sure exactly what that figure really means. National surveys indicate that prisons are inhabited by the mentally ill to the extent of 20%. So if you include, for instance, sociopathy, then it might be 100%. If you think that is a mental disorder, 100% of the guilty, anyway, who are in the county jail, which is, in fact, a decreasing proportion, especially since the Supreme Court decision earlier this month that police can stop anybody on the street that they like, and they look on their little smartphone to see if there is any outstanding warrant for this person, including things like an unpaid parking ticket. And if they find that, they can search this person and find a gravity-activated knife or a marijuana cigarette, and off he goes to the county jail. So, where do the mentally ill actually belong? The history of dealing with the mentally ill is one generally of decreasing constriction and confinement and blame, although the arc of history does not, in this case, always bend toward justice, as I will point out. Originally in a religious age, a medieval age, mental illness was attributed to possession, either good possession, in which case these people were worshipped as seers and savants, or much more likely possession by the devil, in which case exorcism was the requisite treatment, often brutally physical, sometimes lethal. That does take care of the problem. Now, however, in a more secular age, beginning with the Enlightenment, the mentally ill were moved primarily to jails and prisons and almshouses, places for the poor. So this lasted, with the exception of some reputable mental hospitals, which sprang up primarily in Europe, and one notable one in Philadelphia. In the Enlightenment, famously, Dr. Pinel in Paris unshackled the mentally ill. But basically, they were consigned with criminals and with debtors, until the Victorian reformism in the mid-19th century. Around here, the heroine of that movement was this marvelous woman called Dorothea Dix. Started out as a school teacher in Massachusetts, ended up, after being the head nurse on the Union side in the Civil War, ended up lobbying state legislatures and Congress to do something about separating out the mentally ill from the criminals with which they were blithely consigned. She said they were mad, but they were not bad. And in fact, it led to the growth of the state hospital movement. In New York, we have one of the oldest, had one of the oldest in Dutchess County. We had two in Dutchess County, but one of them was founded in 1869, one of the first in the United States. This lasted for about 100 years, until funds dwindled, the hospitals got overcrowded, and increasing research showed that for the mentally ill, a hospital is no place for a sick person. This may be true more widely than with mental illness, but what it led to is something which was called social breakdown syndrome, where it's essentially a form of use it or lose it. If you treat people as invalids, it is invalidating. What they lose is what is called executive function. What they lose is the capacity to take initiative, to persist, to prioritize, to organize their lives, to meet the challenges of everyday life. So after you've been in the hospital for some remarkably short period of time, you have a notable decrement in your ability to cope with life, because it's all done for you. So what this led to was the famous Community Mental Health Centers Act of 1963, signed by President Kennedy 1 month before he died, one of his proudest laws. And it was undone in the Reagan administration when funding was cut by more than 30%. And there was supposed to be two arms to this movement: release of patients from mental hospitals, growth of mental health centers, treating them primarily as outpatients. One proceeded as if the other was happening when it wasn't. So what you got was an outpouring onto the streets of a population of mentally ill, which was underfunded, underserved, underemployed, underhoused, an underpopulation from the start. And what can you do with these people? There was a movement to send them back to mental hospitals, a movement. My finest moment, I'm afraid the moment that I will be remembered for in my whole mental health career, is the coining of the name for this movement to send them back, which became the longest word in the English language, which is anti-deinstitutionalizationism. So if you want to write that down. Yeah. There. But it was too late. The gates were open. they were on the street. What can you do in the form of deviance control? These people on the street sometimes behaved oddly. This makes people nervous because they are unpredictable. What you can do is, at this moment, you have the great growth of the prison industrial complex. They're waiting for them as if designed for their very well-being are prisons, sometimes privatized, springing up and enlarging all over the country and getting overcrowded. So back they went, largely for petty crimes, nuisances being a public nuisance, the crime, trespassing, failure to obey police orders. In they went. And because they were disturbing to people. What this led to is the largest congregation now of the mentally ill in this country is in Los Angeles County Jail. The second largest is Rikers Island. So this, plus the new Jim Crow of locking up black people in prisons, both of them together combined to make America #1 in prison population. Bigger than Russia for rate, bigger than North Korea, bigger than South Africa, bigger than everywhere, many of them combined. So what you get is a lot of black people, a lot of mentally ill people. Imagine being black and mentally ill. There's always somebody worse off than yourself. So this is exactly the opposite of what mental health treatment ought to be. They behave in a disorderly manner in prison and in jail. So what do? You put them in solitary confinement. Does this help mentally ill? It makes sane people insane. It makes insane people worse. And this leads to the scandalously high suicide rate in American jails and prisons. This is a national disgrace. And in our county jail, there is going to be a special wing for the mentally ill. We're being humane here, after all. And it will be called a transition center or a treatment center. It has reminded me for some time, I think I have mentioned, of the old childhood riddle of if you call a dog's tail a leg, how many legs does the dog have? Dog has 4 legs. It doesn't matter what you call the tail. And a jail is still a jail. So, what then are the purposes of mental health treatment and what are the purposes of a jail? They are, I would like to suggest, entirely antithetical. In mental health treatment, we use support and understanding and re-education to try to improve the life of this person. The purpose of jail and prison is somewhat more crowded, and certainly clouded. Originally, when there were penitentiaries, it was to make people penitent. That turned out not to work very well. There is also the idea of deterrence. Worse the crime, the longer you're meant to suffer. There is a lot of evidence to show that severity of punishment has no effect on crime. The only thing that really has an effect is the certainty of being caught, which is a different issue altogether. Another possibility is that it is for rehabilitation. I think the evidence strongly rebuts that. It is, as Frank has indicated, a kind of training ground for professional criminality. And you can see that in the shocking recidivism rate. Or public safety. You take people who are dangerous and you remove them from society. However, all the evidence that I know indicates that this has a relatively minor effect compared to the forces of economics and demographics and culture, particularly such a thing as stable families, which are, of course, not at all encouraged by locking up a lot of young fathers. So, what can we do? We can keep another possibility. I should list all of the possibilities to be fair to the prison philosophy, is keeping people before their trials from running away. But the people who are retained are not those who are most at risk of running away. They are the ones who are least able to pay bail. So it's a question of locking up the poor. And finally, the remaining purpose of prison is simply punishment, a feature of our Puritan Calvinist heritage. And that is
Roger,
unarguable.
excuse me. We're running out of a little bit of time, so I just want to maybe.
Well, let me just summarize in a sentence or two, leaving out all of the interesting and important things that I wanted to say. It is that if hospitals are generally not beneficial to the majority of the mentally ill, jails are much worse, and that 70 to 80%, which is a possibility now in our jails, the 70 to 80% who will still be in jails, if even if it's languishing in a special wing, if that jail in Dutchess County is built as planned, we must do what we can to stop that.
Thank you. And now for Honey Minkowitz.
I'm actually going to go last.
Oh, okay, great. Yep.
So I'll try to condense so we can at least get to all the panelists and some public discussion. I want to say Dr. Christenfeld actually segued it for me. I think the last time in American history that we have had a reform that was needed concerning an issue related or similar to the one that we have concerning mass incarceration was the 1840s with Dorothea Dix and the shift for caring for the mentally ill in a way that even now we would say is not really caring, but it was a shift. And this issue of mass incarceration that we're facing right now should be of great embarrassment to this country. And I feel like it's hardly spoken of at all, let alone in the manner that is appropriate. Like the doctor said, we dwarf every country in the world in the amount of our own citizens that we incarcerate, and hardly have any intention, apparently, to rehabilitate and bring back into society. Our percentage of people that we have in jail compared to China is, I think, for every 100,000 people in America, we have 737 people in jail. And for every 100,000 people in China, they have 118 people in jail. And we often refer to China as a repressive state. And it's almost befuddling. It's amazing that we have that kind of rhetoric about them and have these facts that are sitting in our lap. In 1969, Richard Nixon made an address to Congress declaring a war on drugs in reaction to the counterculture movement that shocked and frightened many Americans. And I propose that war on drugs was ill-conceived and malicious. Recently, someone reported that his right-hand man, John Ehrlichman, declared before dying that the intention was to target leftist drug users and hippies and blacks who were protesting and shouting in the streets for rights. And if he could criminalize them and put them in jail, then he would gain politically from doing that. And whether or not people believe that Ehrlichman said that, because of course the response has been, now that he's dead, he can't defend himself. Whether or not people believe that Ehrlichman said that, the statistics are effectually the same as his plan. Since the war on drugs was declared, there has been 8 times for the white population the incarceration rate. That was in a report by the Human Rights Watch in 2000. Since the war on drugs has been declared, 26 times the incarceration rate for African Americans and 22 times the incarceration rate from 1969 to now for Latinos. We have an extraordinary problem. And not only do we have an extraordinary problem as it pertains to just the number of people that were incarcerated, the racial disparity is astonishing. The use of cocaine, heroin, and crack by young white students of school age. For heroin, I believe young white students are 7 times more likely to use cocaine than young black students. They are 8 times more likely to use crack cocaine, which is a myth on the street, than young black students. And they are 7 times more likely to use heroin. And these statistics were produced by the National Institute on Drug Abuse in a report in 2000. African American youth and white youth use marijuana equally, okay? But the incarceration rate between the two groups is so radically divergent, it's mind-blowing. And the manner in which policing occurs in communities in order to deal with the rampant drug possession and use that is not statistically founded is dramatic, therefore resulting in the unfortunately complementary duo of people who are either mentally ill or of darker hue populating our prisons at an alarming rate. I don't know if the profitability of these prisons has inspired capitalistic investment, or the capitalistic culture has just, thought that it would be a good idea anyway. But we are also leading the world in privatized construction of jails and jail contracts. It's by far, there's no one close to competing with the United States with privatization of jails. And it is also something that is, it should be a state of emergency, I think, and hardly discussed explicitly in our political debate. I'm trying to move quickly through some of this. Some people, I'm not a proponent of drug use. I am very, those people who know me, I'm slow to take an aspirin, okay? But the issue of treating drug addicts and drug abusers as criminals is really having terrible effect on our communities. I mean, because we've had policies that have been so long ghettoizing communities, separating them. And in black communities where these statistics are just devastating, where young fathers are being taken out of homes for 25 years for possession of drugs, the effect is just awful. And because we've had this racially based ghettoizing policy that has separated people, the majority of the United States does not even recognize how awful the effect is because we're not living together, you know? And so the media presentation of violent, dangerous criminals on the streets being taken off is satisfying the mind and making people, the conscience, and making people think that, you know, of course we have this burgeoning, you know, prison system because we have these excessively violent young people on the streets that need to be removed. And the statistics show that since the war on drugs has been declared, that 70% of the increase in the incarcerated comes from drug-related incarceration, and 0.4% of the increase of incarceration, this is from a Pew poll, 0.4% of the increase comes from violent crime. It's almost negligible. So, you know, what we are really talking about is creating a war and incarcerating the victims and really not caring what happens to them after they're incarcerated. And the solution is to build another one, you know, expand the system and invest in it more. You know, even when all of the statistics show that we're moving in the wrong direction. I will forego the last thing that I was going to raise to just share a very quick anecdotal story. My cousin, my father benefited from IBM's Not Forced Affirmative Action program in the 1960s. IBM did it of their own initiative, and they went into urban areas and they went into ethnic neighborhoods and they recruited people out. And my father was a person who grew up very poor in Camden, New Jersey, and he was recruited to come up to Poughkeepsie Kingston when they opened up their branch, and then he moved to Poughkeepsie and he worked 30 years there. And so my family moved out of what was abject poverty in Camden to a middle-class lifestyle here in the Hudson Valley. But my cousins stayed in Camden. And so I often look back at the parallel between my life and my cousin's life. And one of my cousins, he's about 2 years younger than I am, went to Pennsauken High School. And Pennsauken High School is gigantic, and it demonstrates all the symptoms that we say are problematic with education right now in urban centers in the United States. And it's out of control. The teacher-student ratio is ridiculous. And my younger cousin, his younger sister, was sexually assaulted in the stairwell his senior year. He was 17, turning 18. Someone tried to rape her in the stairwell. And of course, she and the assailant were questioned and interviewed in the office, and the interview was kind of like, you know, well, did he rape you? And okay, good, it didn't happen. And the kid got OSS, out of school suspension. And you know, my cousin was enraged, and so was my family, about the kind of, the response was kind of like, well, good thing you didn't get raped, you know? And the school took very little culpability about the safety, the issue of safety in the school, which was the real issue. And so my cousin, enraged, the next day went to school and broke the kid's jaw when he came back, you know, from out of school suspension. And of course, he got charged with a felony and spent his first 2 years out of high school in jail. And he is a felon. And he tells me so many things about how his school, the only people who came to his school were military recruiters and no colleges. And how the whole lot of them could, you know, you had to protect yourself in the school. And this school, very much like many other schools, is part of the problem with our incarceration issue, where people don't care, that you have these masses of kids, that the school's got 50% graduation rate and a high percentage of incarceration, and the only way to escape is to join the military or, hustle with 2 or 3 jobs out of high school. And it's, and it appears when you listen to the political debate that people don't really care about the reality that people are facing. And, I'm here just to say that not only do we have a real problem, but this prison project in Dutchess County is a reflection of our national condition, and we cannot continue to just ignore it. So.
Thank you. Now, did you want to still go with Honey or Paul? Which
I can go, yeah.
Paul? Okay.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming out and talking about this topic. This is a worthy topic to discuss, given the fact that the United States currently incarcerates more people than any other country. And I know it's been said, and I want to talk a little bit about the school-to-prison pipeline, but from my perspective, working in the Poughkeepsie City School District for over a decade, and I just want to start off by saying, coming at it from a different angle. And what I mean by that is 2016 marks the 10th year in which the New York State Court of Appeals, it's the state's highest court, ruled that the state was failing to provide resources necessary to receive, in quotes, this is from the New York State Constitution, a sound basic education that is every student's constitutional right. And right now, New York State currently owes schools throughout the state $4.8 billion. And its total for Poughkeepsie is $9 million. And right here in Hyde Park, it's over $5 million. And what's that money going to be used for? It's going to be used for hiring more teachers, offer more classes, more extracurricular activities, and after-school programs that are essentially going to keep our kids off the streets. So that's where I want to start off. And some of you may be thinking, well, what does school cuts, not funding schools, what does that have to do with the county jail? Well, my answer to that is called priority. Okay, what is our state's priority? What's our county's priority? What is the priority of our country? And when you cut funding to schools, it's going to lead to stressed out teachers, overburdened counselors, and administrators that cannot effectively deal with students. And the results, high suspension rates, expulsions, and the arrests of millions of our young students. And this is what is meant by the school-to-prison pipeline. All right. And so here in Dutchess County, when you have schools that are not getting the proper resources that they need, at a time when the county is set to build a $192 million jail, I think having a forum is very important to keep this issue on the surface. And I just started getting involved with this topic this year, and it came about through a conversation I had with my students. And I remember the class. So we were talking about the progressive era and talking about how workers in the Homestead Steel Mill were protesting, and they're protesting because the factory fired the union workers and hired non-union workers. And they're complaining that if you don't hire us, we're going to get upset. We're going to basically be arrested. And at that moment, I asked the students right there, how many of you heard of the new jail? And they raised their hands, and we talked a little bit about it. And I asked my students. I have a class of 27 kids. I said, how many of you have a parent or guardian or relative in jail right now? And out of 27 students, every single one but one student raised their hand. And that was not just that one class. I have 5 classes. All right. So you can see how this is affecting communities. And students also asked me, I said this previously, Poughkeepsie is also under something called receivership. And in middle school and several other schools, including the high school I worked at, we just got off the receivership. But several other schools in Poughkeepsie are being threatened to be closed down. So my students will ask me, why don't you build a new school? Why are they closing schools when they're building larger jails? So this is a very personal issue to me that I feel obligated to be involved in. All right, so the message that is being sent to our students is not the right message. And I feel that we, people here, we need to push our representatives, state representatives, county representatives, to fund education and to provide real alternatives to the school to prison pipeline. All right, so I have a couple ideas. They're not just my ideas. I've been talking to several legislators, including Hannah Black, including Legislator Tyner. And these are some things that can be done right now in the county legislature. And there are a number of after-school programs that can keep the kids off streets. I'm talking about something called Project Return. It's an after-school program designed and motivates high school at-risk students, like I said, to keep them off the street. Project Green Teen, which is a project, or it's an after-school activity that is, the objective is to kind of expose students to environmentalism. Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Summer programs like Cornell Cooperative Extension. I actually helped one of my students fill out an application for this. So I know these programs are out there. I know they exist. Some of them need to be bolstered up tremendously. Tutoring services for our students. And if we're going to build and put money into a $192 million jail, don't you think we can come up with a youth center in the county to give students? Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to speed this up, but I just want to say that as a country, we spend over $75 billion a year on the criminal justice system. New York State averages $50,000 to $60,000 per prisoner to keep them in jail for 1 year. And I think it is time to revise this system. And in closing, I just want to say that it's my belief that when a society neglects and oppresses and ignores the most basic needs of its citizens, it will leave them impoverished, uneducated, and unemployed. The effect of this is hopelessness and more crime. The way I see the situation is that we can either educate or we can incarcerate. If we continue to go down this path we are on now, we will doom generations of our students to a future of more anger and more bitterness. However, it is my hope that people here today, people on the panel, we can work together to build a society of hope and compassion. And I hope we can turn the tide and build a society that puts an emphasis and a priority on jobs and education instead of jails and incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And now, Honey Minkowitz.
So, how many of you actually know that a mediation center exists in Dutchess County? Well, now you all do. Thank you. We are part of a network of centers across New York State that are known as CDRCs, Community Dispute Resolution Centers. There is a New York State law that states that every county within New York State needs to have a mediation center, a CDRC, Community Dispute Resolution Center. And we're located in Poughkeepsie, and we can help communities, we can help families, we can help schools. Anyone who is having a conflict, you're welcome to come to the Mediation Center. Our most active program is in small claims courts. We have a highly trained cadre of volunteers that are in practically every small claims court across Dutchess County. And we have a roster of judges that we work with regularly that are very kind to our program and refer parties in dispute to our mediators in court every week. But there's a variety of other things that we do outside of court, as well as things that we do that are self-referred. So we also have a family mediation program. We can mediate between parents and teens, custody visitation, agricultural disputes, basically lemon law, anything where there's a conflict, community members can come to us. It doesn't have to be court referred. It can be community referred. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, we have a cadre of highly trained professional mediators. And we are always recruiting for more volunteers. And we would love to do training within communities to help communities resolve their own disputes. So that's the mediation aspect of what we do. In terms of what we do with schools, I mentioned earlier that I am a trainer for a program known as the Alveus Bullying Prevention Program. We know that zero tolerance policies in schools do not work. Suspending students contributes to the school to prison pipeline. Students who are suspended, every additional suspension that they receive or the additional time they spend outside of school increases their likelihood of joining the juvenile justice system. So we know that that doesn't work. And we try at the Mediation Center to work with schools to have programs that are more on the educational side versus the punitive side. I'm working with a number of school districts right now. We are generously funded through Dutchess County Agency Partnership Grant, so your county dollars at work, helping to fund some of the programs that we can do in these schools to reduce this issue, as well as a United Way grant to implement the Alveus Bullying Prevention Program. Students who are bullied are more likely to be truant and avoid school. Which can also contribute to the school to prison pipeline, as well as the students who are responsible for the bullying are also more likely, due to the zero tolerance policies, be suspended from school. And what we try to do with this program is implement a cultural change model. In this model, we look at every aspect of what's happening in a school. We ask the school to evaluate its code of conduct, its policies and procedures, and look at what really works for students. What is more student-friendly? What would allow students more voice? We have an annual youth summit for students in grades 7 through 12, a bullying prevention conference. It typically happens in Bullying Prevention Month, which is October. And at the last youth summit that we held, I had the opportunity to speak with a number of students from across Dutchess County, as well as from Ulster County and Westchester County. And I asked them, if you could tell your teachers and administrators one thing, what would it be? And they overwhelmingly said that they have no voice in their school. They feel that they're not being heard, that what they want to have happen in school isn't happening. They feel that their teachers and administrators are not responsive to their needs. This isn't news. I don't think it's rocket science. I think that it's, take a look at what's going on in schools. We have less time for arts. We have less time for working with students individually and having those, what I call community development conversations. Students are more keyed into social networking and less time communicating with each other. Programs like the one that I implement and help schools implement, the Alveus Bullying Prevention Program, really work with teachers and administrators to provide that time back in social emotional learning. It's not a curriculum, it's a social change model. And that's really what it takes. And we also need the support of the community to be implementing programs like this. We need community members to become part of the school. Schools are microcosms of what happened in the real world. So we need everybody's intervention to help tackle problems that are happening within the school. There's always a need for volunteers in school. There's always a need for people to come in and help students, help them, tutor them. Literacy Connections is a great program. They've got a Book Buddies program. They go into the schools regularly and read to the students and help them learn. They also have a GED program for students who have dropped out. So there are a number of resources in the community to tackle this problem. Assemblyman Skartados also mentioned restorative justice. Have any of you heard of what restorative justice is? So it's actually a fantastic model, and what RJ is, or also it's called restorative practices. You might have heard that terminology as well. Restorative justice basically says that we're looking at the harm that was created by an incident. So if an incident, if something was done to another person or to a community, we're looking at the impact that that incident had. And we're bringing together everyone that was impacted by that to have a conversation about it. So not just the students or the people who were responsible, not just the person who was directly impacted, but all of the bystanders. Whether they were directly impacted or indirectly impacted, they're all brought together to have that conversation. That is also something that we can do at the Mediation Center. We can not only host mediations, but we can also host these restorative circles, which have been known to reduce recidivism, which declines the problem as well. So those are all things that we can offer the community. We also offer communication skills workshops, conflict resolution skills workshops. We do have a peer mediation program that we offer schools. Millbrook has a very active peer mediation program. We just recently trained them. So there's a variety of things that we can work with schools on and communities to help tackle this problem. And that basically wraps up what I have to say.
Thank you. So now we're going to open it up to questions. So if you have a question, you can feel free to come up to the podium and speak into the microphone. Not too close, though. I give that distance. Yes.
Hi, I'm Maria Quackenbush, a former teacher in the Wappinger Central School District. And my question is, I forgot your name.
Oh, Honey.
Honey. In the peer mediation and conflict resolution programs you have that you offer schools, do you do it at the elementary level?
We can do it at the elementary level. The peer mediation program, we've worked with all ages. We have a mediator who used to work in the Wappinger School District, and she helped coordinate a peer mediation program in that school district a long time ago. But we can implement K through 12 all of our programs, including our bullying prevention programs.
Right. And, well, the reason why I ask is because I actually got to see the results, the impact, the changes that it brings about in the young. So I find that if you wait too long, it doesn't have as much of an impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gina Klein. I'd like to follow up on what Maria just said, especially regarding the Mediation Center. I have been a volunteer mediator. I'm familiar with your work. I would like to see peer mediation programs in every single elementary school in this county, and I think that the county should be funding this. Absolutely, hands down, this goes without saying. The other program I would like to encourage the Mediation Center to look at again, and I know it's been considered in the past, and the decision was to go with the All-Wise program. I'd like you to look at the Roots of Empathy program again. It has been a proven program. It is all over the world at this point. It was developed in Canada. I'm sure you're familiar with it, and it's such a successful program, and it is extremely low cost and very highly effective. They've got a proven track record. Please implement this here in Dutchess County. And I'd like to make one other comment. I'm a book buddy in the city of Poughkeepsie schools, and I work in the Clinton schools. Just recently, I read something in the newspaper regarding lead in the water in our cities. I am extremely concerned about this. You're talking about, we know what happened in Flint, Michigan, and what we found out since then is that this absolutely is happening all over the country. So we're taking our children, our most valuable resource, that are living in poor communities, which are older buildings and older pipes, and we're feeding them lead and destroying their brains. How does this make any sense? This should be a very simple thing to remedy. Please write some legislation to fix this ASAP. This goes without saying. Thank you.
What was the name of that program? What was the name of that program you mentioned? Roots of Empathy. Thank you.
Assemblyman Frank Skartados is going to address that.
So the issue of lead in the schools. The last few days before session was over, we passed a piece of legislation that what it does is it provides additional aid to schools in terms of building aids so they can conduct a test of lead at the source in schools that were built prior to 1986. And then subsequently, they'll be testing all schools. So the legislation is already in place. So,
The filters in though.
understood, but first they have to, test to make sure, which schools need attention. So we provided the fund in terms of building aid for every school, so that will take place. Now, I don't know, but recently we've been dealing with some issues in the city of Newburgh, for example, and how that water was contaminated because of PFOAs that were basically leaked from Stewart Airport that went into Silver Lake and Washington Lake and subsequently into the drinking water. So we also have been addressing that very vigorously, and I am in the process of writing the governor. I'm not sure if I should make this public, but well, I'm writing the governor to ensure that all people are tested for contaminants, chemicals, and so on and so forth at our expense. In addition, we will be providing filtration systems, and currently, by the way, the city of Newburgh, for example, is getting its water from the aqueduct. And it will cost the state $230,000 a month. But that's our responsibility because of the stupidities that have occurred. And because we continue to rely on finite pollutant resources as a source of energy that is contaminating our environment and the very same elements that have created life. Recently, I fought and I passed legislation in the Assembly concerning the Pilgrim Pipeline. I don't know if any of you are aware of it. So I passed legislation in the Assembly, and I hope that once we return, I will be pushing my counterpart in the Senate that chickened out because the Pilgrim Pipeline itself had an objection to my legislation. But they don't realize what they're actually doing. In fact, this pipeline is very dangerous and we get no benefit whatsoever, and it doesn't mean that it's going to eliminate the means of transporting oils right now, which is barges and trains. It doesn't mean any of that. In fact, it may increase because at the same time this pipeline that is coming down through on the side of the thruway, it actually sends two spurs in through the city of the town of Newburgh, which is dotted with little ponds and streams and lakes from which they get their water supply. And two spurs are actually go right through the town of Newburgh and into the heart and soul of the environmental justice, which is Hudson River. So once we return, I will be pushing my counterpart in the Senate to address this, and I hope that the Thruway Authority does not give the Pilgrim the permission to go ahead and build this massive infrastructure that has grave potentials for us.
Hello, my name is Dr.Roger. I'm from Poughkeepsie, New York, and first of all, I want to thank all you distinguished people that are coming out, and I hope we have another one just like this, because this is very informative, and I think we all appreciate the hard work you are doing. What I want to ask is, first of all, that since the way they've been treating the school system, and I have this book here I've been reading just recently, that they've been trying, like with people of color in the school to prison pipeline, they have been trying to have police officers in the school system, which does not work. And I think what it is really doing is trying to coerce and intimidate people in the students of the school system, public education, especially people of color and Latinos and handicapped students, and trying to make it more difficult for their life And also, we have to deal with the violence because crime is because of the economic and sociological problems that this youth have. They don't see a future, and we need to do something with that and change the quality of life so they do have a future. And number 3, to get that problem done, we cannot use police officers, no matter how trained, is with mentally ill people because they don't know the system. And we don't need to have these children being permitted to see people in school with guns and weapons that they initiate outside their own life because they need the help that we all have to give them. And also we got to get people in office who think like all you here in that kind of atmosphere to help us get the programs we need and not have a big jail. Thank you very so much for your patience.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica and I live in Poughkeepsie. I'm from Poughkeepsie originally, but my job right now is I am an admissions counselor for Glenmont Job Corps. So my job is to work with youth ages 16 to 24, and we are the deterrent so that they don't end up in prison. I recently had 3 young men who came into my office, said I am here because I don't want to end up in prison. I'm going to fall into a lifestyle I don't want. They heard my little speech for an hour. They decided it wasn't for them. 2 of these young men have called me recently. They want me to help them get out of going to jail. It's something now that I can't do because my hands are tied. We are here, Glenmont Job Corps is here in this community to deter right now. I have seen young men and women who have come to my center with only garbage bags full of clothes, maybe $10 in their pocket if they're lucky. They're coming from homeless shelters. They are now graduates. They are living on their own. They are not receiving any public assistance. They have their own cars, they have their own apartments, and they are self-sufficient. We work with youth ages 16 to 24. One of my young men, it's funny, he was in my office today and he actually said some of what this panel is saying. I wish he could be here because he would tell you what life is like for him here in Poughkeepsie. So we want to help in any way that we can, bridge this gap and make sure it doesn't happen. I have information and cards if anybody is interested. We are here. My office is at 1 Civic Center Plaza. I also work with agencies around here in Poughkeepsie to help our youth. Thank you, and thank you for this panel.
Could I speak to you after? No, what's her name?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming.
She didn't hear.
My name is Brendan Lawler. I'm also a social studies teacher in a high school. So my question for all of you would have to do with student to adult interactions in school, particularly when it comes to discipline for students. Schools have a very finite number of ways that they can respond when students misbehave, when they do things that break school rules. Students can be assigned detentions. They might be assigned to have a discussion. They might be put in school suspension, out of school suspension. Frequently, we have students who also suffer from mental illnesses who go through the same sort of disciplinary process as well. So my question is, within the public policy realm, both within school districts and within the state, what other things can be done to try to change it so that we don't create this process where students are punished and then each punishment is an escalation from the previous punishment all the way through, so that we can actually prevent students from being suspended. And particularly when they're suspended out of school, that's when we also do have a tendency, as you guys have mentioned, to see that increase in the number of times that people get in trouble, the number of times that students get arrested. At the same time, if they're not in school, they're not learning. It's a very difficult thing to educate people who aren't in school, and at the same time, when those students aren't in school, if they have been suspended out of school, if they have been incarcerated, if they have entered other programs, the school district is still required to educate those kids. Again, the problem is we bundle work together and we send out work to the kids to do independently. So they don't actually have a lot of the direct instruction that they require and will help them to get an education moving forward. So I'm hoping you guys could speak to that. Thank you.
So thank you for that question and comment, and I'll be brief because I have several people who are excellent policy folks next to me, but I think one of the solutions is that schools need more bias awareness training. Part of the problem is that when students of color or students that stick out in any way in the mind of the disciplinarian for any specific reason, they just get more attention that is corrective and disciplinary simply because of a preconceived idea about the nature of this person's character based upon the way they appear to them. And that is resulting in the high level of disciplinary action and the consequence that you're talking about. And so one of the first things that need to happen, I think, is that people need to do trainings where they become aware of their own biases and aware of their own thought process in order to deal with the initial contact. There is I don't know if you all have heard of, has anyone heard of James Childs? He has a bias awareness workshop that he conducts in mostly Ulster County. He works out of Kingston. But there are several groups that do bias awareness training, and I think attitude is really so important. And when we start seeing children as our children, not those kids, we will make a significant step toward really raising and educating instead of doing what we're doing right now.
I think it's very difficult to think of schools as the answer to racism when there's racism in the schools and deeply embedded in the American psyche, as we seem to be seeing increasingly, shockingly, these days. I empathize deeply with the problems in high school. I think even pre-kindergarten is, in many cases, too late to deal with this problem. What it calls for is parenting training from the moment a child is born and possibly beforehand, to raise children to be inclusive rather than exclusive, and so that they will not be 2 years behind by the time they get to kindergarten. It is endemic in a culture of poverty. So, yeah, we've got to cure racism, we've got to cure poverty. There are some big items on our agenda.
I think education is labor intensive. I think you were talking about, basically what we are talking about is having more of mentors and role models and people that, the human element, where people and children are just like flowers, they need tender, loving care and somebody that can put their arms around them and say, you know what, you can do better, I believe in you. They need someone that they can look up to. And often children, they start with parents. But if you have a broken family, where do these children turn for that role model, the people that they can look up to and try to emulate? And try to do better and try not to disappoint anyone. So this is what we are missing. We are missing the human element in our schools and sometimes in our communities. And this is why it is important to have after-school programs or even after-schools at the school, whether it's Boys and Girls Club or other programs. And by the way, Paul spoke about after-school activities. One of the things we've done in the city of Newburgh was to create the Newburgh Armory, the Unity Center, where everyone comes together, not just children, but families, and those that are experiencing difficulty, whatever it might be, economic, social, language, and so on, where they can get assistance and help. We are in the process of looking at the same situation here in the city of Poughkeepsie. And I have reserved some money for that. But it will take a village to really improve our circumstances in the school and in our community. So when caring people care about children, then we produce caring citizens.
Yeah. I think an underlying theme we hear about all of these programs is we're talking about something which is the opposite of punishment, the opposite of jails. What is most important is a trusting bond between a mentor and the recipient. It's exactly the same in psychotherapy. The thing that matters the most in psychotherapy is not the credentials or the experience of the therapist. It's whether or not there's rapport. If there is a feeling of trust, a feeling that there is somebody who's on your side and knows what he's doing and wants to help you, I think that underlying almost all of psychotherapy is the placebo effect. If you really believe that this is going to help, it's going to help. That's what we need. Frank and others have mentioned the big brothers and big sisters and mediation and the programs we've heard about from the audience. That is what we need. What we do not need more of is out-of-school suspension and jails.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in the process of training a school right now in the Alveus program, and I said this to them earlier today. This isn't rocket science, this is people. It's about communication. It's about looking at the school as a system, as an organization. There are many moving pieces. A school is not just for the education of the students, it's also a workplace. My interest and my area of academic interest is in workplace bullying and workplace conflict. And, you know, these are trickle-down effects. If conflict is not being effectively dealt with on the staff level, it's going to trickle down to the students as well. They're going to see that there's disunity. And along those lines, everyone within that system needs to have a common understanding, a common language, a common definition, and common training on how to address issues whenever they happen. The program that I work with specifically talks about bullying, but it's not just bullying. The approach that we teach teachers and administrators can be dealt with can be used for all types of conduct disordered behaviors. Anytime there's mean and hurtful behavior happening in a school, there is a best practice for that. How do you address a student? How do you get the behavior to stop? In the moment when you see something happen, it's about getting the behavior to stop, but in a way that is respectful of everyone that's involved and also addresses the students that are bystanders, that are watching what's happening. They need to see adults as role models. We were just talking about that. They need to be able to see that there are people in the school that they can trust and come to and talk to. That is not only a preventative measure, or that's not only the end result of what happens as an incident, but it's also a preventative measure. Whenever students see that adults are taking corrective action, that helps them feel safe about their environment and lets them know that there are people there that they can talk to and they can trust. So it's really about creating that cultural change and also taking a look at the policies and procedures. Are they more on the educational end or are they more punitive? And what are the correct things for your climate in your building? You know, I talked about restorative justice and restorative processes. That is being highly used in a number of school districts across the country. But is it the right fit and match for your school? You know, that's something that teachers and administrators need to take a look at. Is every conflict or every issue able to be mediated? Is that the appropriate way to address everything? You know, not in bullying situations. Mediation's not an appropriate approach to be used in bullying. But, you know, making sure that the action matches what the appropriate response is from teachers and administrators, and being able to be seen as role models, and not just ignoring whenever something happens. That also creates a climate, if it's not being approached appropriately, a climate which makes students feel anxious and that they're not being heard. So it's looking at a number of things across the school system to find what works best.
I just want to interject 1 second here. Going back to the very good point that Brandon brought up, being as a teacher, I think a lot of teachers, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, a good faith limb, because I love teachers. I'm going to say that the majority of teachers really want to help their students, and they really genuinely care, and they want to give them, help them through it, right? But they just don't know how. So if Brandon was to come to you, or the Mediation Center, and say, how would he go about, which route should he take to getting the skills and getting the training that teachers need to really get down to the root of the problem?
Just come to the Mediation Center and talk to me. We can definitely work, and more than happy to work with any school on any program that you're, from anything from peer mediation to setting up a training for, if you're willing to implement the bullying prevention program. We can work with any school or community group to set up any of our programs. So we come out and do workshops on communication skills, on conflict resolution, team building, leadership skill and development. We can, if it's something that you have a need for, we're more than willing to help.
Do you mind sharing a phone number to reach you at, just in case?
My cards are also on the table, but you can reach me at 845-471-7213. My direct line is extension 211. My business cards are, again, on the table.
Hannah, can I just address this for 1 second? So I think everyone hit the nail on the head, and I just want to kind of reiterate, based off my experiences in working with Poughkeepsie, I think the root causes of discipline that I see every day is poverty and institutional racism. And if you look at, areas, even if you look in Poughkeepsie, look at Lourdes. I went to a library last week and I drove by Lourdes for the first time, and it looks like a D1 college. Just imagine if Poughkeepsie City Schools, all schools look like that, if they all look like Spackenkill or Arlington. I think you'd see a big difference in terms of graduation rate and suspensions. And I think when I see students act out, they act out in desperation and hopelessness. And I see a lot of my students have developed like an internal mechanism of oppression. So they feel like, because of the circle of poverty that they're in, there's no way out. So, and I think it's going to come down to resources. It's going to take money to invest in city schools to give them the equal opportunity. And I think that I talked a little bit about that with the campaign for fiscal equity. I just want to kind of clear something up here. The Assembly is on the right side of this issue, by the way. I know we have a state Assemblyman. I just want to make sure that it's the problem lies in the Senate and also Governor Cuomo. But I do believe that it's going to take more resources to eradicate the root causes of school to prison pipeline, institutional racism, and ultimately poverty.
Okay.
Yeah, David Ray, Hyde Park. I'm on the town council in Hyde Park. I want to thank Hannah and Paul for putting this together. It's really a wonderful thing you've done. A public forum for this. People don't want to talk about this. They don't want mental health, race prejudice. They don't want to put it aside. They don't want to see it. Drug abuse, they don't want to hear it. It's a big problem. And until we shed light on it, we're never going to solve it. Famous resident Eleanor Roosevelt lived here, and she was a champion for the downtrodden, and the black and brown race. And people in Hyde Park years ago criticized you for that. So it's just not as vocal and out there. But we've had good people in this town run for office and serve very well. So I'm proud Hyde Park is the place we're putting the forum on. And I hope you're welcome back here to keep shining the light on it and keep it out in the Assemblyman. I thank you too also. Obviously, your heart is into it. Everybody up there's heart is into it, and I can really feel it. And that's what we need, get community involvement. And I'm very proud of Hyde Park to have this. Thanks.
My name is Bill Rubin. I live in Poughkeepsie. And about 3.5 years ago, I learned that Dutchess County was planning to build a bigger jail. And I thought this was a pretty bad idea. And at that time, I joined an existing organization called Engine, acronym for End the New Jim Crow Action Network. And you should know that I recognize at least 8 other Engine members here in this room tonight. So basically, I have the sense that, in a way, you're sort of preaching to the converted. So we've been working to try to stop expansion of the jail, and I have to tell you, I'm a little bit discouraged, particularly after the vote in March by the Dutchess County Legislature to fund the $192 million jail. I mean, I could kind of see that coming for quite some time, but this seemed to be kind of to me, a definitive moment, and I'm kind of discouraged and don't know what to do. So if anyone on the panel has an idea what some of us can do, if anything, to prevent the jail expansion, I'd be real interested.
I think that my suggestion would be, the goal of this panel tonight was to discuss our resources and put our minds together and come together as a community. And I think that I've learned, certainly from this panel, a lot more of what is out there. We just have to tap into it more. And I think that if we're actually tapping into that and getting involved the way that we should be, I believe that we're going to start seeing these resources help prevent students, the school to prison pipeline. And I believe that we can start seeing a reduction in the need. So, you know, that's ideally speaking, I understand that, but that would be the best approach as of right now, because well, it's on the record, I voted no for it, so we all know that. But you know, it went through. So at this point, the best option is to make it so that the need for expanding as much isn't there. And in order to do that, we really need to take a more active role in preventing it from happening to our youth and our young people. Yep.
Hey, can I say a couple things again? So I understand that you're feeling discouraged, and I think hopelessness is our country's biggest enemy, if you think about it. But like Hannah said, we're here to engage and inform each other, and we can't stop talking about it. Just keep, you know, hopefully we can have another forum, and maybe the next one can be in Poughkeepsie. We can have a much, you know, larger audience, and we can go on from there, and we can grow. And also we need to talk about running candidates that are on the right side of this issue, right? Yeah. So there seems to be a disconnect. Like Dr. Christenfeld said, you know, why didn't the county put up for a referendum? Because it would have failed. Well, what does that mean? It means we have to do a better job of, you know, screening candidates to run for office, and we need to make sure people get out and vote. And if we do that, then we'll turn it around. And the last thing I want to say is, if we want to know how to change this country, all we have to do is look to our country's past, right? If it was 100 years ago, what would we be talking about? Urban squalor, poverty, the gap between the rich and the poor. And what happened? In the progressive movement, people mobilized, they pushed the government, and things changed. What happened in the 1960s? The civil rights movement. Things got worse, but they got better. We're at a turning point in this country right now. And I think the Sanders campaign is evidence of that. Like, there is something going on. There's something going on in this country right now, and we just have to keep pushing the envelope, and we can create the change that we're talking about.
Joel Tyner has been trying to get up here for a long time.
Joel Tyner, County Legislator for Clinton and Rhinebeck. I just want to say thank you guys for doing this. And Bill McKibben was on WAMC a couple years back, and they asked him about preaching to the converted. And he said that that's one thing that the other side does really well, that the other side preaches to the converted so the converted work harder and can convert others. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Paul, for bringing up the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the project, the Youth Bureau Project Return Program, and the Green Teen Program in Poughkeepsie. Those three things used to be part of the county budget, and they're not anymore. They've been eliminated over the last 6 years. And just so everybody knows, from 1996 to 2012, the average county fund balance, the money left over at the end of the year in Dutchess County, the average county fund balance for 17 years was $20 million. Now, the fund balance last year was $57 million. Just so everybody knows that. So there's no reason at all to underfund that stuff. I would ask if you guys would consider mobilizing these people to come speak at the next county legislature meeting. That's Monday, July 11th at 7 p.m. I've been in the county legislature for 13 years. I've seen over and over and over again for a long time, even just 3 or 4 people speaking passionately can make a difference. The issue is not over. Hannah was nice enough a month ago to agree to co-sponsor a resolution that I put forward saying that, can the jail expansion be a little bit less? Because after that March 21st vote, 2 days later, the Poughkeepsie Journal did an editorial saying activists don't go away. That was 2 days after the vote. The Poughkeepsie Journal did an editorial saying activists don't go away. Even the county executive said, well, if we don't need to build the 3rd floor of that new jail, let's not do it. Even the Republicans who voted for the jail expansion that night, there were 4 hours of testimony against it. Even the folks in the county legislature majority said, hey, $192 million is not a minimum, it's a cap, it's a limit. The sad thing is, basically the entire Democratic caucus, myself and Hannah, co-sponsored that resolution. We submitted it a few weeks ago to be on the agenda for next Thursday, just asking for the jail expansion to be as little as possible. It's not even being allowed onto the agenda for committee day. A lot of people in this room know about Pat LaManna. If you read the Poughkeepsie Journal, there was a big letter to the editor she had on this. So I would love it. Thank you for this open public dialogue and discussion. None of that happens on the 6th floor of the county office building. If you watch, and Hannah knows, she's shaking her head, I think she might agree with me. That doesn't happen. They don't allow our resolutions onto the agenda. The resolution didn't say no jail expansion. The resolution just echoed the Poughkeepsie Journal, echoed the county executive, echoed the legislators who voted for jail expansion. And it's not even allowed onto the agenda. We need people to come speak up and raise a ruckus. That's Monday, July 11th at 7 p.m. There's a whole bunch of other things I wanted to say. I'll just say one more thing. Pay to play is involved. Richie Green, a few years ago, got the contract. Okay, we need activists and elected officials to talk about this. Richie Green got the contract to design that jail. 1.2 million to design the jail. That was a vote that went down in June 2010. Richie Green. Now, Ken Ritchie, who's the president of Richie Green, lives about an hour and a half south of here. Last year, he gave $2,000 checks to the county executive. Mr. Molinaro needs to return those checks. That's pay to play. Even the Poughkeepsie Journal said that's wrong. And Rockland County and Orange County passed laws against that. We need activists to speak up on that.
I'm going to jump in here just very quickly to make an announcement that all of these proceedings are going to be on YouTube by tomorrow. And if you want to find it, the easiest way is just go to Hyde Park NY Prison Pipeline. Okay? Okay. Hyde Park NY Prison Pipeline.
Herb, I'll get that link also and post it on my Facebook and email too.
Hello, thank you for putting this forum together. I'm Derek Gideon. I'm from Rhinebeck, but I'm also active in End of the New Jim Crow Action Network in Poughkeepsie. As my friend, I don't know where he went, but as Bill mentioned, there are about 8 of us here. I just wanted to echo the calls for people to get more involved. And I wanted to mention specifically that Bill was, I share Bill's feeling that it was incredibly discouraging that the vote on the jail went forward and that they're on the move to build this thing and spend all of this money on more incarceration. The one thing in the middle of all of that discouragement that I think was very encouraging was just how many people turned out to speak up at that legislative session and oppose it. I think it was something like over 70. And I think that if we can get that same level of involvement and get that same number of people to be continuing to be involved and continue to be actively organizing, then maybe we can actually change something, because we've talked a lot about some really great policy solutions tonight, but as people have been alluding to, it's a political problem as well. So anyone here who's just learning about some of these issues for the first time, I'd really encourage you to get involved in Engine and to talk to any of us afterwards. We meet on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of every month in the Family Partnership Center in Poughkeepsie. And because I don't think any of this is going to change until we change the underlying problem of all of this, which is that there are people who have no power, and we need a movement that gives power to those who have no power. The other thing I just wanted to ask, that was kind of a shameless plug there for getting involved in Engine, but something that I just wanted to ask was, I wanted to raise the issue of police abuse and racial disparities in arrests, which is something that wasn't talked about as much tonight. And according to USA Today, there are, according to this big map that they assembled using FBI data on arrests, there are actually 2 police departments in this county that have a higher disparity between black and non-black arrests than in Ferguson, Missouri. And those 2 police departments are the town of Hyde Park and the town of Poughkeepsie. And so I was just wondering if any of you could address that and talk about how we can start to solve that problem.
I think for myself, I need to see the information and go from there and see what we could work on and do, and then come back to that, if that's okay. That's the best answer I can give for myself right now.
Good evening. I'm short. Good evening. My name is Barbara Hobens. I live in Hyde Park now, but in the 90s I was very involved in Manhattan as far as dealing with the crime and dealing with the community. I was with they had precinct councils, community councils, where every month the community met with the police precinct and talked about the quality of life crime, the real crime, who just got out of jail, what their problems were, where the handicapped people live in case of fire to help. It was a real community and police working together, and it sounds like a lot of that's lacking. I was also involved with a movement that took, there's so much misdemeanor crime, turnstile jumping. They would be arrested, brought downtown to 100 Center Street, and jailed, go to Rikers. It was insane, and they were ignoring quality of life crime. Small drug sales, things like that, prostitution, street prostitution, seeing it as a victimless crime. I see that I would like you all to look into Midtown Community Court. We worked with Judge Judith Kay, God rest her soul, and she was wonderful. And it takes the arrest of a misdemeanor crime, anything that happens, as a point of opportunity to help. And then you have the counselors come in. What are the problems? Do you need therapy? Do you need drug assistance? What do you need done? one of the things that was alarming was we did community service. And it was funny, I would get like 10 people who were community service, and people said, "That's horrible, you're making them do things that are horrible." I said, "I do that every day as a volunteer," you know. And, you know, the whole thing is that they learn skills. And I tell you, it is such a success. If I could sit here, I could start crying when I tell you the people that went on to go to college, to become restaurant managers, to become really successful people from jumping over a turnstile for a small arrest. And I would like you to look, to me, so many kids go to jail for that one stupid mistake. Weren't we all kids? You know, I've never been arrested, you know, but I tell you, it just seems like too many people are in jail for too many stupid things, and it could ruin them for life. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Barbara, real quick. I really appreciate that. I know that you are already deeply involved in our community. However, if you have any availability, I did hear Honey mention that she needs some volunteers. So if you, I think that your experiences would really be helpful. Okay, thank you so much.
My name is Earl Brown. I live in the city of Poughkeepsie. Since I moved to Poughkeepsie in 1990, and I had an awakening, and since then I've been involved with programs that concern youth. I had a lot of help when I was a young fella from someone outside my family, so I try to give back through Boy Scouts, through, right now, I mentor in the high school and mostly the middle school. And I see what teachers and administrators go through. It's not an easy job. And I have nothing but respect for them. Good teachers and good administrators. I see a lot of kids come in that really need help. Teachers need support. And I'm talking about whether it's psychiatrists, psychologists, guidance counselors, or sometimes someone just to be in there, as Mr. Skartados said, to put an arm around them, because they are traumatized, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Poverty traumatizes you. Violence in the streets, where so many of them come from, that traumatizes you, and it's internalized. Therefore, they end up with all kind of obnoxious behavior, and this is where it starts. They get put out of school, they start to hang with the street, and before you know it, the interest in school is gone. We need more support for the teachers and administrators, because they can't do it all. They're trying to teach, they're trying to be social workers, they're trying to be psychologists, and it's just overwhelming. Until we get more help, support systems in the school, it's going to be the same sad scene. Now, I've tried everything personally, been a mediator, a mentor, and I see what goes on. I see what goes on with these young people. They really need some help, a lot of them. Thank you.
So I was a teacher once. I taught a New York military academy when many of the kids were coming from around the world, but often kids that were from wealthy families, and they just had trouble. You know, they were problem kids. One of those kids, by the way, was Donald Trump. He graduated in 1964. I wasn't there, thank God, and I have nothing to do with how he turned out.
Okay.
But I did speak with people that were there and knew him very well. The point being that education is a very important field, but it also takes special people to be educators. Not everyone qualifies to be an educator. And I commend those that have the patience, the dedication, the commitment. to work with these kids and, feel that they, at the end of the day, they've done the best they could possibly do to inspire and energize children, to reach their potential. That's what ultimately is all about. So, it's a specialized job. And you know what? Those that do a great job, they deserve our applause. They deserve our support. They deserve to be recognized. They deserve to be paid. I agree. I also want to bring up the issue of funding. Paul talked about how the state of New York owes our school system $5 billion. It is true. Our state constitution says that we have a responsibility to provide sound education for our children. In the last, decade or so, our economy took a dive, and they came up with this creative idea known as gap elimination adjustment, which meant they withheld money from the schools to actually make up budget gaps. But this year, we paid back all that money. And I do agree that we still owe, whether it's $4 or $5 billion to our school districts, and we are fighting for it. I want you to know that the Assembly is the vanguard of education, and we believe in education very strongly, and we fight every day. It's one of our biggest issues in Albany. You have to understand, this government has a budget of $156 billion. $25 billion goes for education. It's a big budget, when it comes to education. So obviously, we all deal with the education issues, and we all participate. But I want you to know that the Assembly and every single member that I know in the Assembly is pro-education. And every year we fight for every dollar. We have to fight with the Senate, and we have to fight. Even though they'll come out and say how they supported this, that, and the other things, let me tell you, behind the scenes, they divert money somewhere else. They have the priorities. We have our priorities. Education is our priority, and that's what we fight for. And even the foundation aid that increased by $1.5 billion this year, then last year, in addition, every year I fight for additional discretionary funding. Last year I brought $1 million to the Poughkeepsie School District so they can maintain an all-day early childhood education, right? And all-day classes. Every single year we fight for this money, and I will continue to fight for it. But, as legislators, this is what we can do. We fight to pass legislation, and we fight to bring resources to our community. That's what we do. Another issue that came up during the panel discussion was about, decriminalizing things. Well, one of the things that we've done, by the way, was to decriminalize the Rockefeller draconian laws that ended up sending children to jail. Yeah, we decriminalized it. And we gave judges the authority and the common sense and the rationale to make judgment as to who belongs in jail and who doesn't. So we have to hold them accountable, because they get elected too. So they have to do the right thing. What is the rational thing to do? Sure, kids are going to get themselves into trouble. But some kids, they deserve a lot more attention than others. And that's what we have to do as a community. It's not an easy thing, but it would take everybody. Politicians and clergymen and teachers and administrators and everyone, and especially, education begins at home. If the child gets up in the morning and is not fed and is not ready to learn, well, how do you expect them to learn? They won't learn. Their mind is somewhere else. That's why, providing good food, addressing the issue of poverty and food and so on, these are very important things. We bypass them, we overlook them, but they deserve our attention. So if we want to build a better community, it would take every single one of us. There's just so much that teachers and administrators can do, but together we can do a lot more.
Mr. Skartados, can I ask a quick question? You mentioned what the legislative did in terms of decriminalizing Rockefeller drug laws. You also mentioned Congressman Maloney's, which I think it's the Sentencing and Corrections Act of 2015. So there's a glimmer of hope that the state and the national government's trying to push and recalibrate our criminal justice system. With that being said, do you think this jail expansion is going in the wrong direction?
Okay, I was trying to avoid the issue, but here's the thing. You know, the state government requires that every municipality, or rather every county, has a jail. We understand that. But the state doesn't tell the county how big of a jail you should have, or who should be going to jail, okay? We don't tell them that. And if we are, now, I realize that the county has been sending their inmates outside, particularly in Ulster County where I live, and, you know, they're spending whatever $1 million they're spending, they're saying they're spending. I can understand that. So they may need an expansion. But again, the question is, how big of an expansion do you need? How much money should we invest in this? And shouldn't we be diverting that money to build more classrooms rather than more jails? Yeah.
The State Commission on Corrections, if I'm not mistaken, has been putting pressure on Dutchess County for many years to expand the jail.
Well, again, because the state requires that, you know, you have a facility that can accommodate your inmates in a comfortable manner. So there's a requirement by the state. But again, I'm not sure how big of a jail do we need. I'm not sure how much money we need to invest so we can build, a bigger facility for the sheriff. I don't know. That's something that we have to, and the legislators, I think, the Democratic legislators have been doing a great job in looking into it and advocating for the right thing. So I support their objectives.
I did only reserve this until 8 p.m. We're a little bit over, but if we can wrap it up in 5 minutes, I think we would. Can we do that? Is that okay? One more question, and then we'll have to end this. But we can
Hello again, everybody. Thank you. I would ask these questions, and please feel free to think about it, find out information, pass it along to Paul. You don't necessarily have to comment now. My questions are related to this new technology that the police have available, in which they can check instant records, in addition to the idea of poverty rates and their impact on somebody gets a parking ticket, $85, doesn't have the ability to pay, doesn't show up for a court date, boom, failure to appear. Failure to appear turns into a bench warrant. Next time the person is approached on the street by the police, they pull out that technology, find out all of a sudden this person has a bench warrant, they get arrested, they get brought in, and now they've gone from a parking ticket to all of a sudden now they have a much more complicated criminal record. And my question has to do with how do we address that in a comprehensive way to make sure that we don't continue to have these escalating crimes and criminal activity that create a larger record, which makes it more difficult for future employment, makes it more difficult for people to continue to interact in society the way that we hope and want them to, again, because they couldn't pay a parking ticket. So that would be something, again, if you could pass that information on to Paul and he can send that on to me. In addition to that, somewhat related to this, would be people moving from place to place. One thing that we do find students who come from backgrounds of poverty is that they have a tendency to move in district, out of district, back into district, back out of district, to a variety of different places, which of course means that there's no consistency within the educational process and there's not much attachment to a specific community because sometimes they come in, it's been the 5th place they've lived in the last 3 years. So thank you very much, appreciate it.
I can answer your first question. Get a good 9th member on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. I'd like to thank the panel and everybody that came here tonight. This is very important, and I appreciate everyone being here. Thank the panel again.
Yes, thank you so much for coming out and being a part of this very important conversation. And I hope that we can continue it and we continue to grow and learn and make some real positive impacts on our community. Thank you so much.
One moment.